All right, so I wanted to look at some different papers today, as far as like different art papers to do projects and things with, and these are some of the most common ones that you would find available in stores, whether that's the big box stores or ordering online. And obviously, there's a lot of different specialty papers and things like that out there. First up, for most common that people or kids might grab to do artwork with is going to be standard copy paper. This is a 20-pound paper. You can see it's kind of just thin, flimsy, crumpled up. This is the paper that most everyone's familiar with. And this is at about what's called 20 pounds. Again, that refers to basically how much you can do to the paper before it falls apart. And the one thing about copy paper, though, is if you do work with it, that work could fade over time because this has still got acid in it. Through the paper making process, copy printer paper, it's made in bulk. It's bleached out to get the nice white color, and those chemicals a lot of times are left in the paper, so that um, there's really no real precautions to taken to make it archival, meaning you could keep it for a while without doing anything to it. If I were to draw on this with a pen, then if I come back in a few months to maybe a year or so, then that pen will have faded simply because of the chemicals still in the paper. So, still a good general use paper. Practicing doing basic just drawing, playing around, things like that. Younger kids with their crafts and things. It's inexpensive compared to other papers, and it's just one everyone kind of goes to or has easily accessible. But again, this is just copy paper. That's kind of the first thing you might run across as far as working with your artwork or sketching or something like that. If you put water on it, it's going to wrinkle up, so it's not very durable as far as putting water and things on it. So mostly dry media and things of that nature. The next up is going to be newsprint, and of course this is named because this is the same stuff that newspapers are printed on. Uh, this is a 32-pound paper, so this is a little bit heavier than the copy paper, but pretty much if this gets wet, it's going to fall apart. Very thin-like quality in this one, and it gets thinner. Now this particular piece, this is a kind of an issue with newsprint. It ages very quickly. So if you were to look at some of this piece in a little bit different light, you would see that there's some yellowing starting around the edges, and it's also feeling very brittle. Newsprint will get to the point that it just falls apart when you pick it up, especially if it's laid out anywhere where sunlight can hit it. But this is good for your graphite, your charcoal, dry media. It has a really nice look to it when you do those things on it. But you would have to take precautions to keep this up. So again, this is just a 32-pound paper, or 52 grams per square meter. Now, drawing paper. This is usually starting around 50 or 60 pounds. This particular piece, this is a 60-pound piece of paper. Good for all your dry media, color pencils, things like that. And this is where you start to get into what's called the tooth of the paper. The tooth determines really how much material the paper can hold, as far as like your pastels, your graphite, your charcoal, and the deeper that tooth, the more it's going to be able to hold. Now, this is more durable than the copy paper and the newsprint at 60 pounds, so you can do a lot more with this without having to worry about it. There are some that would go ahead and maybe try some watercolor on this, though I usually prefer my paper a bit heavier before I do that. Even some inks, depending on how heavy you work in the ink, it could cause some wrinkling as well. But this is just your typical drawing paper, and again, this is about 60 pounds. So it's you can feel it's a bit thicker than the previous two. Now, mixed media paper, that comes in at about 90 pounds, and it is just that. You can use a lot of different stuff on here. If I take this, I don't know, you can kind of hear it's a much heavier sounding paper. It's got a thicker edge to it, if you can see that. And it's made for a variety of things to play with. When I talk to students about getting sketchbooks and things, I tell them they may want to go ahead and get a mixed media sketchbook, because then they can do more to it, whether it's pastels or watercolor, paint if we wanted to. There's all kinds of stuff we can do on here. This has also got, well, at least the kind that I have them get is a rough texture to it. So it's got more tooth and it will hold more material on it. So we'll do everything from pen work to graphite and charcoal in here. And of course you can use it for a variety of other things. You could collage, glue, and it just makes a really nice heavy paper to do a lot with. All right, so that's your mixed media paper. I don't know how well it's showing up on the screen when you're looking at it, but each one of these is just a slightly different tone. Most of them will be kind of a not super bright white. Just for instance, I'll get the copy paper back over here so you can see the difference in the copy paper tone versus the drawing paper tone or the mixed media. The mixed media and the drawing paper are intended for archival purposes, so they haven't been heavily bleached like that. And that process hasn't been done to them to have that super bright look to them. So you can get some that are super bright like that, but you're going to pay a bit more for it. So again, this is just standard mixed media. A good general all-round paper for your sketching and different projects. All right. Now, this is one everybody's familiar with greeting cards. This is cardstock. This is 110-pound paper. Again, a little bit heavier than the mixed media I just showed you. However, cardstock is more of a commercial use, and it's made to run through various printers and things like that. So this has still got acid in it. This is not an archival quality thing, but this is what you would be using to make your greeting cards and things like that. Of course, you can also buy different handmade papers and things that would do that as well. But this is your heavier paper that most people would have available from like the copy, office supply store, from the copy paper section and things, would be the cardstock. So again, it's good for general, crafts and things like that. But as far as doing your artwork on it, your artwork may not last as long if it's not taken or treated properly to hold that artwork. And then finally, the last piece I'm looking at is a watercolor paper. This is the heaviest paper that I deal with, 140 pounds. And I mean, you can see in here that this is a very, very thick piece of paper. So of course you can tape it down and do your watercolor and stuff on it. It's intended to take abuse, at least in that regard, of the different watercolors and things and different techniques you might do to that. So usually you would have hot pressed and cold pressed, and those determine basically how much tooth you have. Your hot pressed paper tends to run smoother, with your cold pressed paper being more toothy, and of course that would give you different textures. Usually a lot of times with students and things, we would do pen and ink on the watercolor paper first, and then come back through and put the color on top with the watercolors and things. And most of the things, when I talk to them about it, we're not flooding the paper with washes or anything, but you can do that. And of course all the different watercolor techniques with things like salt and stuff like that. So watercolor paper, this one's run about 140 pounds. I've seen it about 135 pounds as well. And beyond this, you would get into what's called some of your boards, like Bristol board and things that get a bit heavier, a little bit more durable. But as far as the papers and things, this was just a quick run through what you might run across and be available for different projects. For anything to last on any paper, of course, always remember, you don't keep it in direct sunlight. Always keep it protected so that you don't have any UV exposure to any of the paper. And the newsprint here just happens to be the one that shows it first. You can see some yellowing around the edge. I've got some older stuff that has turned completely yellow, even within protective page protectors, because air can still get to it. So, your different papers, that will happen at a different length of time. And so these more archival pieces aren't going to do that unless they get very, very, very old, or you leave them out in sunlight or something like that. So always with your artwork, you want to keep and hold on to, keep it protected in that manner. So quick run through on papers. I just want to kind of get that out there, and then just to give everybody kind of an idea of different things that you'll be able to work with your art and your different drawing and paintings and things like that.